Well, there was this point where we had um, two UV maps, one for the input of the leaf and one for the stem, and they were kind of different for the output while we were baking. So we had eight stems, and they used 8 different texture spaces in the bake. So I thought, well, maybe that wasn't totally clear how to do that. So first of all, let's go here, take this example of a cube. We go to UV editing mode, and when we unwrap this cube, you see it's unwrapped like this. This is nice maybe for a bake, but you lose a lot of texture space and a lot of detail on the texture. So suppose you want to use, let's get some material on this cube. So we go to the shading, and we have here our cube, and we say we want to use nodes, and we say we need a new texture. We're gonna add a texture. Shift A, input, texture, image texture. We open the texture, we go to, where's here we go to textures. We do some wood, maybe some planks to make it simple. I'll say just this one, doesn't really matter. Hang on, somebody's beeping me. I have to log out of SL. We connect this texture to the input, so we have this texture now here, but we want to rescale this and rotate this. So we go to our UV maps, and we see we have one single UV map now. Say this is, say this one we want as a big map, because it's fine like it is now. This is the big map, and this is the input UV map, the other one. So we're gonna watch this one. We have a person, Shara. So we have, we want to edit this cube, and we want to redo this input UV map. So we select the UV map, I select all the faces, I go here to the UV editor. You see how it's mapped, but I want to reset that. So right click the cube, I click U, and I say where's the reset? Here. Reset. And now each face gets reset, and each face will cover the total texture space like this. So each face now is the same. right. We see more also of the texture. We see the complete texture on one face. If we look at this one, and we select this UV map by clicking it, so we click on it and we see the UV map, and we click the camera, so we also see what happens here in the 3D viewport. We see actually the end result of if we would bake it. Kinda. But we want to bake this. So we click this one. And that's what we want to see also here. This we want to bake onto the bake map. So to be sure, I could add here an input saying the UV map I want to use as input, saying this is how it has to look. And I connect the UV map here, that's a vector, to the texture. I also have to make a baking texture, like I showed you last time. So I make a new texture, image texture, give it a name, have to make one, give it a name. So this is the bake. This is the resolution. I don't need an alpha channel because we're not using any transparency. I say, okay, this is the, no, I didn't do it. Didn't say okay. Alpha. This is the bake. Click OK. This we have to bake. Why we do this? Because we want ambient occlusion in the texture, and we want it different for each face. Let's add a plane so we get some ambient occlusion from below. Scale the plane up a little, move it down a little. Let's see. Now it's going to look like this. We want an ambient occlusion, so we add a ambient occlusion node. We add a color ramp. Connect these together. We need a mix color. We can go to color, mix the two. This one goes into here. This one goes into the down part. And now we can play with this. Where is the ambient occlusion? Well, maybe you have to put it in here, yeah? We have to put this one in here. No, we see it here. we have to put this on multiply. Now we can play with it. So if I would kind of really want to make sure all these faces are different, I kind of rotate this one here, move it around a little so we get some differences. Here it's very black, here it's not, here it's very light. So, if I look at all these faces, in the UV map, the texture is for each face the same. Yeah? In the baked map, they end up on different spots. So in the baked map, we have 6 different faces. That's exactly what we want. These 6 different faces we have to export. So that's what I did with the stamps. I divide the faces differently. So if I would make now a copy of this cube, they have all the same input, but they bake to different ones. So if I now bake this one here, I get the 6 different faces of this cube. Is that clear? Yeah, I have my recording on, by the way. So let's bake this one. We go cycles, it's on, we have our noise is on, selected, we have maximum of 10 samples, so it will be very fast, and we bake a combined bake. Here we go, 6 different faces. If I would bake this one, then it will bake overlapping faces. Then you get a mess. So you always have to select the UV map of the one which will be used in Second Life. I hope that made it a little bit more clear. Now, what happens if I join these two together? Which I actually did with these stems, yeah? So say this is a stem and this is a stem, and now I join these two together. Ctrl J, joint. If I select the bake map and I look at all these, then of course this cube will overlap here. The UV map of this cube will overlap the UV map of this cube. So if I join them, I have to redo the UV map of the 2 cubes. I have to give them separate spaces. So let's select all these and move them to the side like this. If I select everything now you see I have 2 different ones. This one here uses this part, this one here uses this part. So actually I have to UV map everything so that they fall now in this single texture space. So I could just select everything. Let's see if that works. Select all, U, unwrap. So now you see it puts them in one single space. So if I make more and more boxes, I get here more and more little squares to make sure they don't overlap. Well, this probably is not the most optimum way of mapping it. Rotate 180 degrees, move it around a little like this. Maybe I can do it. Could do it like I could gain some space. You get the idea? The original UV map of this, the input map, still looks the same. All faces overlap, but the bake map has to be split in the number of faces I have for the object. That's the only way to have a decent bake. Okay, enough about this. Let's go to our last topic. Yeah, it's a sad day, isn't it? It's a very sad day. For you, not for me. For me, it's a happy day. Because this is our very last session now. I hope you learned something. Now, we're gonna talk about baking a high poly mesh onto a low poly mesh. And when do we need that? We need that if we have a very detailed mesh, which is maybe too heavy to upload, but we still like to see some details of it, especially the normals and the bump mapping. So we will upload a simpler version of this mesh, which we call the low poly. And here I have an example. I have here a barrel. And I have a high poly version of this barrel, where you have, you see the different, well, I don't know how to call it, indentations, I don't know what it is. It's kind of, how do you call this, ripped, yeah, so if I would edit this one, you know, I made this one, you see it's very high density mesh, a lot of little faces. You could use that to edit little bumps into it and distortions, whatever. You can make it as high detail as you want, but actually what you want is to have this look on this one here. And if I edit this one, it's way simpler. There's here one face on the top. It has far less edges. This one is like, I have to look at the statistics. This one is like 450 faces in total. And this one is 100,000. faces. I have to look out the window. This is a big difference. 100,000 faces you're not gonna upload. You could try, but it will give you some, complaints, at least complaints of users. So how we do this? How do we get the bump map of this one onto this one? That's really the challenge. For this, first of all, we have to put these two in the same space, in exact the same space. And probably you started first with this one to model this one, and then you started modeling this one. So you always keep a kind of copy of your lower poly meshes. How I copy this one to the exact location of this one? Oh, you select this one, and you hit Ctrl C. Copy location. And that puts it in the same spot. If you have activated this little add-on, only then you get that menu. The same as, if I would gonna rotate this one, and I want the same rotation as this barrel, I select the one which is wrong, I select the one how it has to be, I click Ctrl C, copy rotation, and it will copy the rotation of this object to that object. Where are my screencast key? This one to here, Ctrl C, copy location. Barrels have to be in the same space. That's one requirement. The other one is you need a baking cage. This is the baking cage. It's showed now in wireframe mode, so I can see it easier when I select it. How do we make a baking cage? Let's hide this one and make a new baking cage. I take the low poly, and to see it better, I put it in wireframe mode. Let's put it also here. And I copy it, Shift E. So now I have a copy of the low poly. Copy of the low poly, and I rename that one into cage. This is cage copy, because I already have one. So this is the cage. And now I just view the cage and the low poly on my screen. And I have to make this little cage, or this cage I have to make a little bigger than the low poly. And to do that, I scale it with the Alt S. So I inflate it. Alt S I said, but it doesn't want to move. That's kind of strange, as if it is locked. scale. Alt scale. Alt scale doesn't work. Have to be in edit mode in order for that to work. Alt S, and we make it just a little. You see the black lines here. That's the other one. Make it just a little bigger than the other low poly. Why do we do that? You see here, it's just a little bit bigger. So what's going on? In order to make this normal map, Blender likes to send kind of light rays to the high poly and then catch the reflection, and the reflection is kind of projected on the low poly, which is a complicated process. And to make the work simpler, we tell it by using a cage that it only has to calculate the reflections of that light within the cage and not outside the cage, because that would take too long time and would get the wrong result. So we kind of catch the light reflections between the different meshes within this cage, and that's why we need the cage. Yeah, so that is quite simple actually. Just take the low poly, inflate it a little, and you're done. And when we did that, we can actually, I think you can hide it, and then we select the high poly and the low poly, which are in the same place, and then we go to baking. We go to baking. And now we have to tell it, we're going to bake a normal map, and you have to use select to active, meaning there are two objects involved, and you have to use the active one to make the bake. Which is the high poly is the active one, because the active one will define how it looks, and you have to use a cage, and it will ask you which case. Let's see. So here you put your cage. You have a selection of different objects, so you select the cage and you tell it also the maximum distance of your light rays, and that's kind of the distance between the cage and the low poly. This is kind of a guess, you have to play with that. You know, if I would make this too high, I get a fuck up bake. If I have it kind of right, usually a small number, it looks better. You will see. So I select the low poly. Now I have to think, and then I have to select the high poly with control, low poly, control, select the high poly. And then I say here, I select the normal map to which I want to bake. It's a texture I made. And then I say bake. Bake it. Invalid object cage. Uh-oh. Maybe it's not visible. Let me check something. Let me check something. I have to check. Select the high poly, control select the low poly, and we try it again. Bake. Oh, this doesn't work. Let's see if this is, yeah, it can't be connected. So what I'm trying to do is bake the normal map of the high poly, which you see here. Here baked the normal map, and now I want to use this normal map, which is baked for the low poly. So I'm going to put my material into the low poly. So I will hide the high poly, and now we only see the low poly. I don't see the. And I go to the render settings, and now I'm going to use this new baked normal map for this low poly object. See what happens. It kind of looks the same as the high poly. So if you use this normal map, save it, and upload it to Second Life, and put it on that barrel, you get the same look. If Ultra is on, of course, in Second Life. Otherwise you see nothing. Well, it's all in the sheets. There is, let's say, the exact order of what you have to do. But this is, I just want to explain the principle where you have two different objects in the same spot, and you bake the normal for the high poly and then use it as input for the low poly in the shader. Any questions? Yeah, well, you can add, of course, you can add a texture to it. I don't know if there's a texture here. Here I have some brushed steel texture. You can change the roughness, the specular, make it more shiny, this metallic. Sometimes you see this, which is very hard to explain. You see what happens if I would, you know, increase this more, bigger number. I disconnect this one here, select the high poly, select the low poly, and bake the normal again. Let's try it again, increase this. Bake. High poly control, low poly bake. Well, sometimes this will change, so you have to play with it. That's the only thing. Sometimes you get these artifacts which you think, where are they coming from? And then you have to play with this, with these settings here. Oh, I'm happy enough, good enough. Okay, well, that kind of concludes everything. Now go into Second Life and make a lot of objects. Two people made it to the finish line. I'm proud of you. I mean, actually 3. I don't know if you all been in all classes, but most of you have, you two have been in all classes. Sharina, I don't know. Sharina? How do you pronounce that name? Sharina. Well, anyway, anytime you have any questions, you can either, maybe ask here on the channel or message me directly. I will be around. I'm thinking of doing a new class, which involves scanning of 3D objects. I don't know, I didn't even start making it, but I don't know if you're interested, but I like sometimes, I didn't do it often, but it's kind of tricky thing how you scan a 3D object with a good light, and how you bring it then in Second Life, and how you then transfer this very high poly into a lower poly. That would be the topic of a new class. Some people said that might be interesting. Well, you're welcome if you want to join. Okay, you'll know how to find the tip jar. I think it's in Second Life. Then I would like to thank you for, being a pleasant class. Okay, bye bye.